Hi, good morning everybody. How's it going? In this video, I want to take a look at something that is often neglected when it comes to architectural renderings, particularly commercial renderings, and that is actually vegetation and plants. And so you can see in front of you, we have a pretty nice setup. It's a pretty good sort of beginner project. If we take a look here at the SketchUp model, by the way, this is a model that I got from the warehouse. I did not build this. It's a really nice model though. You can see we've got a pretty basic sort of bungalow single-story build. And if we go back to D5, you can see this is kind of comparable to what I see with a lot of beginners. My current batch of students recently just finished up a commercial property rendering. And one of the things I noticed was the use of vegetation and things like trees and plants. And so it got me thinking, there are really kind of good ways we can go about doing this, and then there's what I see oftentimes in beginners. And so if we actually look at the scene in front of us, we can see there are quite a number of mistakes. And you've probably spotted a couple of them already, but I'm going to point out a few more. All right, the first, and you've probably seen this already, is the use of repeating elements. So for example, somebody would go to the asset library in D5, Twinmotion or Lumion, find a singular pretty looking plant, and just plop them down in a line. Not a great move. Now, you'll also notice we have the use of seasonal trees outside of the actual season. So for example, we've got these autumnal or fall-like trees, but the rest of the shot looks more like a springtime render. Over here on the left, we also have some fruit trees that are just randomly placed there for no discernible reason. In addition, we have a few more problems. You can see the arrangement of shrubbery or bushes right in front of the actual house. And again, it's the same problem, a single entity placed again and again and again, so a repeating element. Back here on the right, we also have another slight problem, and this is really the dividing line between where the lawn area starts and where the walls or exterior barriers. This could be walls or fencing. And you can see there's been an attempt to place basically, where you would place plants, just a garden bed, but it's not very large. This is actually set to about I think it's about a foot, if even. And so you run into sort of problems with trees and vegetation crashing into the walls. Now, if we go back to our stored scene, we can also see there's one other issue here, and that is the use of a singular hero tree or plant like this right in front of the camera. Now, we should point out, you do get trees that are placed by either homeowners or the landscapers or the developers in front of trees, and you especially see this in older properties, particularly more established properties from the 70s and 80s and early 90s, where you do have these full trees right in front. But from a rendering point of view, it doesn't look great. Quite simply, you're obscuring a huge amount of the actual build, all in the name of aesthetics. So, and speaking of the trees, you'll also notice one problem here. We have an area which is set aside for where the tree would be planted, but you can see there's a big issue here where the seam is really obvious, and that's something that we're going to fix. All right, here's the thing. All of these issues are issues that I do see pop up in my students, and I do see them on, for example, the D5 or Lumion, or even Twinmotion or the Enscape Facebook groups. You do see this pop up a lot in beginning architectural renders. In other words, students and people just starting sort of neglect the environment and neglect the use of shrubbery and plantage and foliage, and they just concentrate on the building and then go tree, 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 okay, I'm done. And you can kind of see it really does take away from what could otherwise be a pretty nice commercial looking render. All right, so with some of the issues identified, let's go into the next section and we look at how we can fix these issues and hopefully make your renders look a lot better. All right, I'll see you in the next section. Okay, everybody, welcome back to part 2. In this section, we're going to go about making some changes and fixing some of the issues that we identified in the earlier part. Now, to fix the first element, we are going to go back to SketchUp. I'm going to make sure that my D5 converter is actually turned on, and this is the same if you're using like Twinmotion's Datasmith, or the Lumion converter. Just make sure it's actually turned on. One little pointer I will also suggest, regardless of which of these live sync or elements that you're using to send information from SketchUp to your program, I'm not entirely sure why, but I strongly recommend that you turn off the sync camera. This seems to be true of all of these converters. It just seems to slow down really both programs and sort of cause a lot of performance lag. So when in doubt, turn off the camera sync. All right, we mentioned one of the first issues was this, not giving enough area for the bed. And that's a relatively easy fix. Grab this line and actually just extend it out a little bit more. Now, you don't want to take this out like, several feet here, but at the very least, you want to be able to plant your assets without fear of them crashing into the wall. And that should be a relatively easy fit. Now, let's go ahead and hit the D5 converter, and we'll send that back over to D5. All right, so now we're going to have a lot more breathing room if I zoom in here. Now, I'll fix this issue with the grass going over the edges. So that's one very simple fix to do. And that just gives you a lot more space over here to work. And I'd rather have more space than less. All right, the next issue, and probably, in many ways, probably the most important one that we want to address, is the issue of the shrubbery and what to place to kind of fill up a lot of space. So you're not just doing single plant, space, duplicate, single plant, duplicate. Now, how I suggest we go about this is, firstly, I'm going to pull up the asset browser here for the models. We're going to go to nature. And you can see we've got some pretty good stuff here, shrubs and flowering shrubs. So how I would approach this is to pick a very limited color palette. And we're going to start with really just a handful of shrubs that do not have flowers. You could eventually sort of think of these as really the ones to take up space or to kind of take up some volume. They're not intrinsically decorative, but they will look good. All right, and I've gone to my recent tab here. I've set up a scene here where I've used quite a lot of these, so I have a lot of these available to me. And so what we're going to do is look for some big plants that we can use that will actually work to take up space. Okay, so for example, I'm going to go for a very simple color scheme of white and green. Now that's my preferred way to do this. I find it looks good. It's sort of relatively inoffensive and it's not very distracting. For example, if you were to place something very vivid, like a really red bush there or red shrubbery, people's eyes are going to go to red before they go to any other color. And so you want to make sure that whatever you're planting is not so vivid that it stands out. So I find that white and green are pretty neutral, but pretty visually appealing at the same time. So they'll work pretty nicely. So here we can see I've got a bunch of assets. The first one I'm going to do is put down this buxus, sometimes referred to as sort of boxwood. And I'm going to hold down C here and just place that here. All right. Now, to add a little bit of white to this, I'm going to add this one here. This is convolvulus, is my very bad pronunciation, more commonly referred to as the silver bush. I'm going to put that here and just place that right down. And you can adjust the sizing of these a little bit, and we're going to space them a little bit too as well. All right. Now, that looks good. And then I'm going to grab this gardenia, or gardenia, depending on your pronunciation. And gardenia just goes by gardenia. And I'm going to place that right here as well. Okay, that looks pretty nice. And what I'm going to do is look at these now from this angle. And I'm going to just adjust the offset a little bit here. You want to make these look organic and as planted as you can. Okay, that looks good. Now, you could do this set piece with maybe 3 or 4 plants. I'm going to add one more. And we might add this flowering gardenia right here, but I'm going to scale this one down and just make sure it sort of acts as a sort of interlude between the others. Okay, that looks pretty nice. Now, what I'm going to do is select all of these by holding down Shift. I'm sorry, I'll hold down Control, might be a better button. All right, that looks good. And now this is in a pretty good spot. I can make my duplicates, and I'm going to drag these out, and you'll notice I am keeping an extra space right here, and I'm going to do this one more time over here. So now that we've done that, I'm going to go back in again and just readjust really where these were all located and situated. I want to try and break up the samey and pattern look. Humans are very good at spotting patterns. It's part of our cognitive processes for pattern recognition. So we try and want to break that up just a little bit. And now that I've done that, I can go in. I'm going to find something else to add. This Astrantia. Astrantia is sometimes referred to as masterwort, and I'm going to just place that right here. And you can see now I'm building up effectively this biome by adding almost all the same plants, and I'm just breaking it up a little bit. And then lastly, over here, I'm going to, in this space here, add something completely different. This thyme plant, or large thyme. Okay, just place that, select one here, and if they do place in exactly the same manner, just go ahead and rotate it to break it up a little bit and off-center it. Okay, and so from back here, I think overall this looks a lot better. Now you can see some of the plants do stand out a little bit more like the boxwood, so I might drop these down just a little bit. You just want to add as much variation as possible. We have effectively though created a very simple biome using really just 3 main plants or bushes or shrubs, and then just sprinkled in 1 or 2 variants. The really cool thing about this is you could select all of this in D5 on the left, and I'm going to go ahead and select almost all of these. May not get all of them. Right click, and we shall make it a group, or Control G. Now, the really cool thing then is I can just hold down hold down Shift, and just drag out my second duplicate here. And it's pretty much identical. And so we can add a little bit more variation, just spin this, and we'll have it going in reverse. I'm just lined up a little bit like that. And what I will do is go in here now and just delete some of the spare ones. Okay, go into this group. There we go. Double click to go into the group. And I think all in all, that looks like a much bigger improvement. All right, in the next section, let's fix up some of the other ones. Now, continuing on from where we left off with some of the sort of bad plant setups, I'm going to go ahead and just delete these. These were the duplicates that we didn't like before because they looked very samey. Now, moving on to talk about the actual trees and putting trees in your scene. So you can see here we have a collection of roses, and they're pretty poor. So we shall delete all of these and get rid of them. And let's talk about adding trees along the side of the property. So my suggestion for this is relatively straightforward, and this is something I've had great success with. Here under the Recent tab, I'm going to scroll down, and I'm looking for a series of trees called the Acer. Now, I believe Acer is just the fancy term or name for a maple tree. And so these are really, really nice. They're pretty good in terms of, so for example, you could go to just the broadleaf in D5 and you could just find there is a bunch of just generic broadleaf trees. They're sort of non-specified, but I think the Acer are actually worth using. And so you can get those by just typing in ACER and hitting enter and using the search bar. And you can see we've got some really nice ones. Now, not all of them are going to be eligible for everything. Some of them are quite large and are best used really framing and behind your property, but you also do get some pretty nice ones that you could use. And I'm going to go to my recent and refresh that. And I'll show you, we've got some pretty nice ones here. So these ones right here and here, I'm going to put hearts on them, and this one right here. I found these to be very, very good. Now, if you place a tree in D5, you can hold down C on the keyboard to actually bring this down. And we're going to place this, make sure that it comes really over the garden or partition wall that you have there, and this would be to separate your property. And I'm going to space these out. One thing to keep in mind, and one thing I see sort of beginners make, is that they do something along the lines of this. and it's effectively a wall of trees. Now, this is just not accurate at all, and you do want to space out trees in a logical manner. And generally speaking, you're going for something between 20 to 30 feet of a gap. That's a little bit much for our purposes, but I think we can drop these in about here. And I'm going to drop another one in here. Now, if you use the same tree, I do suggest that you spin and rotate them. Just spin them and rotate a little bit more, and that you do hit V on the keyboard to maybe scale them up just a little bit. You want to add a little dash of variation. They shouldn't all look uniform, but I think that looks pretty good. You can also just delete every other one and add in another variation. These ones also look really nice. And holding down the C key or tapping the C key will actually scale basically your tree up by percentages, which is really, really cool. I'm going to hold it down and just place that there. Now, I think that looks a lot better. And I'm also going to add another decorative element, which is going to be these white trees right here, the pyrus. And I'm going to place them here. And if after your placement, we do need to just adjust these, I think you can. But even just that, let's get rid of the fruit tree in the back. We don't need that anymore. And we can do the same over here, getting rid of that. And we'll get rid of this hero element as well. You can already hopefully see now, oops, we don't want to get rid of the whole scene. You can already see though, that looks a lot more viable and is a lot more realistic. Now, I'm not saying you can't like add trees around the outside or periphery of the property. You absolutely can. But within the property line, you want to make sure that the stuff you're planting is not consistently uniform and that there's enough kind of variation in there as well. And one last thing, if you've ever planted trees like I have, and I've probably done them badly, then you kind of just want to make these to be a little bit more uneven. Which is not how you're supposed to plant trees, by the way, but just, you know, user error on my behalf. All right, looks pretty nice all in all. You can see we haven't gone crazy with adding a ton of stuff in here. You could also go in and add shrubbery at the base or bottom, but I don't think that's really what you'd get if you got landscapers to do the landscape professionally, or if you're involved in garden design. I don't think you're going to really add plants or shrubbery. The idea is that the trees will grow and give you a canopy. And so I think, you know, it may look emptier, but it is, I think, more accurate. Okay, I think it's looking really good. Let's talk about the grass and how we can fix that in the next section. Now, in this section, we want to fix the very large but sort of obstructive hero element, that really beautiful tree that was in front of our property. And we want to go ahead and change that and bring kind of the visual focus back to the build itself. So in SketchUp, what we did was I've changed this grass material here to just be an actual grass material. That will get rid of any of the D5 grass. And I've moved the area where the tree would actually be planted right here. Okay, so this is what it looks like. Now, we can just happily place our tree here. So I will just find a nice tree. Again, there's nothing wrong with using a hero element. I think they look really, really nice. Let's go to my recent tab and we'll get that tree back, or something similar to it maybe. And I think it was this guy right here. And I'm going to hold the C button down here and just scale this down a little bit. Now, I'll have to double check in my scene just how that looks. But yeah, I think all in all, that will act as a really nice framing device. We can always adjust this or move it around as we need to. But now the main thing is it's in the shot, but it's out of the way. Okay, now the next thing, let's go to our grass. So I'm going to hit I on the keyboard, sample here. And we're going to go to the top right and change this to grass. Now, the grass that I had is grass number 2, material number 2, and you can see it has applied that now across the entire area here. Looks really, really good. Please note that by doing this, you are going to be adding a lot of geometry to the scene. I think my scene jumped up by a number of million right now. So just something to be mindful of. This might be best to do this towards the end when you're pretty happy with everything else. Unless you are running a fabulous graphics card that's really good and can handle this. But for a lot of us, I think doing it at the end will be the best workflow that you can take. Now, you can also see we've got a lot of patches. So there is another way to fix this, and I actually owe this to one of the people who commented on my previous video, Fix Grass in D5, who sent me in the direction of Nuno Silva's video on how to fix grass in D5. And to do that, what we're going to do is hit M on the keyboard, and we're going to go up here, and we're looking for this guy, grass material number 2, or you can type in the search bar grass mat, M-A-T, and there will be 3 options. Now, these 3 options do correspond with the material templates over here on the right. So we can do that. I'm going to select this fellow. I'm going to go to the radius on the bottom of the brush here. And you can see when you crank that all the way to the right, this icon goes blue, which is going to set the brush and switch it to the scatter tool. And I'm going to basically left click here. Make sure I'm on the paint. There we go. And I'm going to left click and apply it. Now, the joy of that is it will fill all of the holes, but you have to be very careful. You can see here, go back to my stored camera really quickly. Again, look at that face count. It's absolutely shot up exponentially. It's just a huge amount. And so, you know, you can use it this way, but if the actual scatter is maybe too much, you know, one thing you can always actually do is just manually brush these in. But this is just a great way to fill in the gaps that are appearing. Now, I have gone ahead and just undone that application. I want to keep the poly count a little bit lower here. And even though there are gaps in the grass, I could probably just manually fix these by sprinkling grass myself. But I just wanted to be aware of that really awesome technique, which is absolutely not mine, but very cool nonetheless. Okay, I want to fix this manually. So I'm going to go to recent, and we're looking for grass material 02, and I will just hold down C, just scale these guys up. And we could, if you want, grab the brush tool here and make sure we're on grass material and slowly just brush this in. I'm going to reduce the radius, maybe increase the density, and we can just sprinkle our grass over. Now, I'm not being hugely careful with this for kind of a simple reason. And that is because we're going to add some other grasses. And I'm going to turn off the scatter, the brush radius. I'm going to add these grass clusters manually. Just scale them down, make sure they look nice. And I think this will look really, really nice when we're done. Make sure we can add just a few more. Just adding this, what we're quite simply doing is just adding imperfections into this border area. And then we're going to ring it with rocks. And that will give it a very nice, hopefully a very nice look. Now, if you do end up with an area like this where maybe it's stepping over a little too much, we can always just grab the eraser tool and kind of scale that back. Now, the next thing is to grab some nice rocks, and I've already downloaded some here. And I'll place them. And we're really just going to edge this kind of thing by just putting rocks over it. And these are just the standard kind of D5 rocks. I am using rocks over, really just over the little stones. And there we go, and place these here. And I have a few more that I just recently grabbed, and just bring them in. Scale them up a little bit and run them around. And hopefully, if all goes well, this will look pretty nice. And it's a really nice way to just sort of add a border to your tree areas. Okay, that looks good. And I think what we can do is maybe just grab some more. And please note, there's a difference in D5 between rocks, these big ones here that I'm scaling down, and the use of the smaller stones, which I generally don't use very much, but maybe you'll find a use for them. I just don't really use them. But these rocks, I think these things look really, really good. And so I'm just going to place these here. And I'm just doing a pretty kind of okayish job of just ringing this tree. And I think it'll act as a very nice framing device. And there we go. Just scale these up just a little bit. All right. Now, when you have this in a pretty good spot, it should be enough to go to the bottom left here. Select all of these nice looking rocks. And I think I'm just very close to my little pause button there. So I'll select almost all of these and hold down this, move them here, and then rotate. And again, I should have actually probably grouped them. Grouping them would have really probably helped me avoid that problem. But we've got the duplicates over here, so let's just grab the stones and just keep bringing this thing. Now, I'm going to go ahead and pause this, and I'll pull it back up once I've got this completely rendered. And hopefully from this side, you can see it'll just look a little bit more finished, and you don't get that weird transition from the dirt into the grass area. Now, it probably requires a little bit more tweaking, but I promise you, it's a really nice way to just kind of add a nice bit of finish to those trees in your shot. All right, we'll be right back in the last section. I'm just going to talk about adding 1 or 2 more finishing touches and some more suggestions. All right, see you in the last bit. Welcome back to the last section, everybody. I just have 3 little things that I want to talk about in the last section. I promise I'll make it fast. Okay, the first is the corners. More specifically, trying to curve out the corners. So you can see over here, very pronounced edges, and you can see what we had here before was a very sharp edge across here. Now, my advice would be to actually curve those out and add in basically just some softer elements. Try and avoid having really harsh transitions between garden bed and everything else. So really just sort of kill the edges if you can. And so what that will look like in D5 is something akin to this right here. The joy of this is, one, it gives you a little bit more decorative space, and so you could come in and make this a little bit more of a visually appealing bed. So maybe you want to come in and go to your favorites and find something that adds a little bit more splash of color. So for example, we could place these here. I think this is either lupin, perhaps. Possibly, I don't know, it's jasmine. Possibly lupin. But let's go ahead and just place 2 of these here, and maybe scale them down just a little bit down, and just add something like that. Something that just breaks up a lot of the surface here. And then maybe we can find something else that we could place, something that will add a little bit of visual appeal. The Astrantia always looks good. Jasmine looks really good. The Consolidia looks really, really good. So let's grab these and we'll place them in here. And so this will act as really a little bit more of a decorative part. So I'm going to put these here. And again, anywhere I've got overlappings, I select them and just make sure that we can spin them. You want to break up the things that look exactly the same. And I'll add some variation here as well. It's just a small little thing, but these colors and these objects are not going to take away from the rest of the shot, but they do make it look a little bit more planned. So again, when in doubt, just kind of curve out the edges. Okay, that looks good. In the next section, I want to just talk about 2 last more things, and then we'll call it for today. Well, second to last thing I want to mention today is the use of imperfections. We generally want our rendering to look as good as possible. I'm going to restart this one in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, the second last thing I want to mention today is the use of imperfections. Now, generally, we do want our renders to look as good as possible, but one of the ways we can do that is adding imperfections. If you're doing interiors, you've probably used decals or something like that, maybe painted imperfections on in Photoshop or used kind of decals from either within D5 or the Megascans library to add those imperfections. For exterior commercial renders, especially something like this with a big garden, it's also nice to go in and add a few intentional mistakes. Now, how this manifests for me is usually the addition of small sprigs of weeds. So I'm going to go to my recent tab here, and I'll go back to models, and hopefully I won't have any kind of slowdown issues. And I'm going to pick just a few of these little sprigs. Sort of intentional errors is a nice way to put them. We can scale these properly down. We want to just make them look like they're kind of there, but accidentally there. Under my recent tab, I've got a few more of these, and they're just, it's such a small little thing, but I think they really do kind of matter. And so let's grab some of these little sprigs and we'll place them just kind of over here maybe, and adding a few more sprigs of sort of random grass even, just slightly different grass model. It's again, very small thing, but I think will really help in the long run. And let's just add a few weeds. Now, these may or may not always be visible in the shot, hard to know, but just having them in your shot, I think really does help. So I've sprinkled a few in there. And again, we've just got a few random grasses. Might scale these guys up and just pop them over the shot a little bit. They won't add a massive amount polygon-wise or anything like that, but it's just such a small little thing. And hopefully it will make the thing look a lot better. And if like this, you think there may be too much, feel free to delete them. They really should just feel like the slightest of imperfections. And I think that will look really, really nice. Okay, with that being said, I'm going to just finish decorating the shot and take a render. And in the next section, I will just talk about the use of biomes and how to approach those. All right, I'll see you then. Hi everybody, if you made it to this point in the video, thank you so much for watching. Really do appreciate the people watching the videos and subscribing. And for those of you who've taken the time to comment on any of the videos, thank you so much. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is the concept of a biome. And this is a concept that I took or really picked up from the Lumion Collective. And I'll provide a link at the bottom for those so you can go check it out. Really, really great educational resource on Lumion. Some really wonderful tips. And the approach from the Lumion Collective is the creation of these biomes, almost like sort of pre-packaged assemblage of assets. And what you can do, for example, take a look at this. Here we have a pretty straightforward one that I've grouped. We have in the middle, we have two, what did I put in here? Two Buxus pants. So that would be basically boxwoods. And then we have Cosmos and Zinnia. I'm going to turn off my camera. I think I have depth of field kind of turned on here. So let me do this really quickly. I'm going to turn off the depth of field. There we go. And behind it, I have, I think, just a generic broadleaf tree. We've got some rocks and we've got a sprinklage of leaves. Now, the idea being here is that you make this biome. And once you have it done, in order to populate your scenes, especially if something might be close to the camera, is as simple as doing this. Just hitting Control and dragging out our duplicates. And so you can see when we do this, it's a really fast and kind of rapid way to populate your scene. And it allows you to kind of build up an entire sort of really just an array of this set biome. Now, one of the other good points from the Lumion Collective was to do simple things really like what we did earlier. Go in and maybe drag some assets out to add a little dash of variation. Just breaking up the sameness of the shot. And one other thing they mentioned was the ability to go in here and really add a few hero assets, something that's really, really nice and really sort of comes out and pops a little bit and gives your scene that kind of like little bit of extra. And so I'm going to just pick, let's pick something. We'll use, oddly enough, let's use these rows and just go ahead and download it and place it in and double and triple, and then select the duplicates and just spin them. And that will be enough to give you a, not the entire group, excuse me. Let's just go in here and grab the rows and spin that. And just add a little bit of sort of variation to it. And there you go. It's a really, really simple way to build up an entire sort of established biome. And you can add your hero assets to make it pop ever so slightly. And any of these can always, of course, be adjusted afterwards. In D5, it's as simple as just double-clicking on the assets and just rotating or moving them or scaling them. But it's a really, really simple way to just populate your scenes. Okay, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and leave it here for today. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.